Have you ever walked into a space and instantly felt unsettled, but couldn't quite put your finger on why? Maybe it was a shadow clinging to the ceiling corner, an old calendar still clinging to last year, or a strange feeling like a pair of eyes were silently watching you from across the room. Most of us dismiss these little details as random or harmless. But what if they weren't? Welcome to New Day Mindfulness, where ancient wisdom meets conscious living. Today we're going to explore something rarely discussed but deeply transformative. 10 everyday items hiding in plain sight that could be quietly sabotaging your fortune, peace, and energy flow. That's right, items so familiar you might have them in your home right now. And no, this isn't about superstition or fear. This is about energy, how it flows, how it gets stuck, and how it shapes the environment you live, breathe, and manifest your life in. Now, before we begin, I have a small, heartfelt request. If you find value in content like this, teachings that weave Buddhist insight, spiritual presence, and practical transformation, I'd be so grateful if you could give this video a like, share it with someone who needs it, or subscribe to the channel. I'm on a quiet mission to reach 1,000 souls on this journey of mindful living, and every gesture helps this ripple of awareness grow just a little further. Now take a breath with me. Think of this video as your energetic spring cleaning guide, because what you allow into your home isn't just furniture and decor, it's symbolic of what you're allowing into your life. Throughout history, cultures across the world, from Chinese Feng Shui to ancient Egyptian temple design, have understood that our surroundings mirror our inner world. If your space is cluttered with unresolved energies, your life may be too. Think about how you feel in a room filled with natural light, flowing air, and vibrant, healthy plants. Now compare that to a room with dead plants, cluttered shelves, and stagnant corners filled with dust and silence. The difference isn't just visual, it's vibrational. And in this video, we're diving deep into 10 powerful symbols, items that might be stalling your growth, draining your abundance, or silently affecting your health and happiness. From cobwebs that trap more than just dust, to broken clocks that freeze your progress, to statues with eyes that never blink. We'll break down the spiritual, psychological, and energetic reasons these seemingly normal objects can block your flow. And we won't stop there. I'll share real-life stories, personal experiences, and subtle shifts that change lives simply by removing or replacing these items. Stay with me, because what you'll discover may forever change the way you see your home and yourself. If you're ready to realign your environment with peace, prosperity, and clarity, you're in the right place. And before we truly begin, drop a comment below that sets the tone for what you want to invite in. Something like, "I am ready to release what no longer serves me," or "Today I make room for peace and abundance." Let's get that energy flowing before we even start. All set? Let's begin the journey inward by looking outward. Section 1. Cobwebs, the silent energy blockers. In the quietest corners of our homes, behind bookshelves, beneath staircases, and high above on rarely touched ceilings, cobwebs often make themselves at home. For many, these gossamer threads are merely a housekeeping annoyance, a sign that someone hasn't dusted in a while. But for those attuned to the subtle energies of a space, from Feng Shui practitioners to spiritual seekers, cobwebs are much more than dusty reminders. They are silent disruptors of energy, stealthily blocking the flow of abundance, clarity, and success. The symbolism of cobwebs in Eastern philosophy. In classical Feng Shui philosophy, the concept of qi, or qi, represents the life force energy that flows through all things: our homes, our bodies, and our environment. When qi flows freely, it fosters vitality, prosperity, and emotional well-being. But when qi is obstructed, energy becomes stagnant, and that stagnation often manifests as challenges in life: stress, lack of motivation, financial difficulty, or even health problems. Cobwebs by nature symbolize this stagnation. They appear in spaces that are untouched, forgotten, or neglected. In this way, they mirror the parts of our lives we avoid, whether it's a cluttered garage, an unresolved argument, or a dream deferred for years. According to Feng Shui principles, cobwebs are like energetic plaque, buildups that slowly suffocate the vitality of a space. An empirical lens. What does psychology say? Even beyond Eastern philosophy, psychology supports the idea that our environment reflects our inner state. Environmental psychologists have long discussed the effects of visual disorder, clutter, decay, and neglect on mental well-being. A 2009 study published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin revealed that individuals who described their homes using words like cluttered or disorganized showed higher levels of cortisol, a stress hormone, than those who described their homes as restful or restorative. Cobwebs might be small, but their presence signals something more profound, an area that has been overlooked or emotionally disassociated. Every corner in your home reflects a corner of your mind. If you're avoiding cleaning that space, what aspect of your life are you subconsciously avoiding? A personal anecdote, a friend's transformation. I once visited a friend, and let's call her Emily, who had an impressive job in finance but was plagued by what she described as a streak of bad luck. Despite her hard work, promotions eluded her, and her team often undermined her efforts. During a casual visit to her home, I couldn't help but notice thick cobwebs lacing the corners of her living room ceiling and a dense, musty energy in the air. Out of curiosity and compassion, I brought up the idea of energy flow in the home and how our living spaces affect our outer realities. Skeptical but open-minded, Emily took it to heart. That weekend, she did a thorough sweep of her home. She cleared cobwebs, opened windows, rearranged furniture, and added fresh plants. Within weeks, her environment felt lighter, but more than that, she reported feeling more confident, more focused at work, and oddly, more respected. A month later, she was offered a long-awaited promotion that had been delayed for nearly a year. Coincidence? Maybe. But I believe she cleared the energetic pathways for her success to finally land. Cobwebs in the residences of the powerful. A curious contrast. Have you ever noticed how homes of high performers, public figures, successful entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, are often immaculate? Think of Barack Obama's clean and orderly workspace, or the serene, minimalist home of Oprah Winfrey. There is an unspoken understanding among high achievers. Your environment is a reflection of your mind. Oprah has often spoken about the importance of intentional spaces, how walking into your home should feel like an exhale, not an assault of disorder and forgotten corners. Imagine Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk walking into a conference room filled with dust and spider webs. Would you expect innovation to thrive in that environment? Absolutely not. The same goes for our personal spaces. The cobwebs clinging to your ceiling fan may be more than laziness. They may be energetic anchors, quietly holding you back. A symbolic reading of webs, the paradox of control. Cobwebs also offer a paradoxical symbolism. A spider's web is a masterpiece of control, a trap designed with precision, structure, and intent. But when the spider moves on and the web is abandoned, it no longer serves a purpose. It becomes a shell, a stagnant reminder of what once was active. Many of us are like this in areas of our lives. We set up systems, goals, and identities, and then leave them untouched when they no longer serve us. The web in the corner becomes the metaphor for the job we hate but refuse to leave, the relationship that's draining but familiar, the ambition we once had but let die. When we clear cobwebs from our homes, we're not just cleaning, we're reclaiming space. We're signaling to the universe and to ourselves that we're no longer attached to what no longer serves us. The science of micro-action. Why cleaning one corner matters. You might be thinking, it's just one cobweb. How much difference can it make? But in habit psychology, there's a powerful concept called micro-action. When you take a small, intentional step toward change, it creates momentum. Cleaning a dusty corner might not change your entire life overnight, but it may inspire you to tidy your desk, to finally write that email, or to start waking up earlier. The environment doesn't just influence your habits, it kickstarts them. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, writes, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If your systems, physical, emotional, mental, are cluttered, No amount of motivation can outpace the drag they create. Cobwebs and energy flow. The Feng Shui compass connection. According to the Bagua map, a fundamental concept in Feng Shui, each section of your home represents an area of your life: wealth, relationships, health, career, fame, and so on. If cobwebs are collecting in the wealth corner of your home, typically the southeast, you may notice issues around money. If they're in the health zone, center of the home, you may feel tired or emotionally drained. Take inventory. Where are the cobwebs in your home? Can you draw any parallels to what's been stagnant in your life? Tools to clear the energy beyond just cleaning. Once you've physically cleared the cobwebs, it's helpful to energetically clear the space as well. Here are some simple tools and methods. Use sage or palo santo to smudge the area and dispel lingering energy. Place soft mantras or healing frequencies, like 432 Hz or 528 Hz, in that space for 10-15 minutes. Add a fresh element, a small plant, a bowl of citrus fruits, or a candle to anchor new energy. Say a positive affirmation like, "I clear what no longer serves me. I welcome clarity, movement, and light." These steps transform a mundane task into a sacred act of energetic hygiene. Cultural perspectives. Cobwebs and global beliefs. Interestingly, it's not just Feng Shui or modern psychology that it warns against cobwebs. In European folklore, cobwebs were considered omens, often of illness or death. In some African traditions, they were associated with deceit or stagnation. In Catholic Europe, particularly during the Middle Ages, spider webs in holy places were meticulously removed as a sign of spiritual vigilance. Even in Buddhist monasteries, where simplicity and mindfulness are central values, monks take time daily to clean and sweep. Not because they're obsessed with cleanliness, but because they understand that a clean environment supports a clean mind. A reflection, a prompt for your audience. Before we close this reflection, ask yourself, where are the cobwebs in my physical space? Where are the cobwebs in my emotional life? Things I've been avoiding, unfinished business, or unresolved tension? What one area can I clear today to invite movement back into my life? You don't need to declutter your whole home. Start with a corner. Start with one thread. You'll be amazed what opens up. Final insight. Cobwebs are small, but so are sparks, and it only takes one spark to start a fire of transformation. The same is true of the dusty web in your living room. Clear it with intention, and you might just clear the path for a new opportunity, relationship, or insight. In the mindful journey of life, everything is energy, and everything speaks. Even the silence of a cobweb. Will you listen? Section 2. Broken clocks. Frozen progress. Time is the one thing we all possess in equal measure, yet how we experience it, how we manage, respect, and even decorate with it can vary drastically. Among the many objects we surround ourselves with at home, the clock stands as one of the most symbolic. It doesn't merely tell time, it reflects the flow of our days, the movement of our lives, and in subtle yet profound ways, our mindset around change and progress. A stopped or broken clock, often dismissed as a decorative inconvenience, may actually signal something far more meaningful. It can act as a metaphor for being stuck, emotionally, professionally, spiritually. Let's unpack what a broken clock may be telling us and how to reclaim the energy it inadvertently halts. At its core, a clock is a measurement tool, but unlike rulers or thermometers, it doesn't just provide data. It shapes our perception. The ticking of a clock, the changing digits, the steady sweep of hands, all remind us that time is in motion. When a clock stops, we experience a visual interruption of flow. Our subconscious registers that stillness. That interruption isn't neutral. Psychologists who study environmental cues have long known that our physical surroundings deeply affect our inner world. In his seminal book, The Organized Mind, neuroscientist Daniel Levitin explains how cluttered or dysfunctional items in our space demand cognitive attention. Even when we're not consciously focused on them, they take up what he calls mental bandwidth. Now imagine a stopped clock hanging on your wall. Its frozen face is not only unhelpful, but symbolically disturbing. It becomes a daily silent reminder that something isn't working, that you are out of sync, that time has stalled. Throughout history, broken or frozen clocks have carried layered symbolism. In literature, they often mark death, endings, or a halt in personal growth. Consider the chilling moment in The Great Gatsby when Gatsby nearly breaks a clock in Nick Carraway's home, a subtle metaphor for his futile desire to stop time and return to the past. In theater and film, a stopped clock is often used to indicate a pivotal or traumatic moment. For instance, in many mystery or war dramas, the stopped watch of a fallen soldier may mark the exact time of death, freezing that instant in emotional amber. This narrative use of broken clocks isn't coincidental. It draws from our collective understanding that time is synonymous with life. So when time stops, when a clock breaks, it reflects life out of motion. I once owned a beautifully carved antique clock, a family heirloom, heavy with nostalgia. When it stopped ticking, I didn't fix it. I told myself it was charming as is, a rustic vintage piece. But during that time, my life also started to feel like it had stalled. I wasn't writing. I wasn't excited about new projects. Even my relationships felt sluggish and uninspired. It wasn't until months later, while deep cleaning, that I took the clock down and either fixed or removed it altogether. I honestly don't recall which. What I do remember is the surprising shift in energy afterward. I felt lighter. My ideas began to flow. It was as though removing that symbol of inertia unlocked something deeper. We underestimate the power of our surroundings, but symbols speak to the subconscious more fluently than language ever could. In Feng Shui, clocks represent time and its passage, movement, growth, progress. A working clock symbolizes a well-functioning rhythm in your home and life. When that motion stops, Feng Shui warns of energetic stagnation. The area of the home in which the clock resides can even indicate where you might be experiencing this blockage. A broken clock in your career zone, north sector, might correlate with professional stagnation. In the wealth area, southeast, it could suggest financial delays or missed opportunities. In the relationship zone, southwest, it might reflect tension, miscommunication, or unresolved emotions. And while this may sound mystical to some, energy mapping isn't far from what Western psychologists already acknowledge. That specific environments, bedrooms, offices, kitchens, cue specific mental states. The condition of the items in those spaces acts like emotional programming. In many cultures, particularly in East Asia and parts of Europe, a stopped clock is considered ominous. In China, for instance, presenting a clock as a gift is taboo, because the phrase "to give a clock," songjong, sounds nearly identical to attending a funeral. A stopped clock, especially if it breaks suddenly or in the middle of the night, is thought to represent the spirit's departure. This belief echoes in other traditions as well. In Victorian England, it was common to stop all clocks in the home when someone died, a way of pausing the household's rhythm in acknowledgement of death's disruption. Of course, most people today don't associate a broken clock with mortality, but the symbolic weight remains. Whether through superstition or subconscious association, a stopped clock is rarely neutral. It brings with it a sense of something undone. If you study the lives of high achievers, CEOs, artists, athletes, one thing becomes clear: their respect for time borders on sacred. Steve Jobs, for example, was famously obsessed with design symmetry, including the role of clocks and calendar icons in Apple's aesthetic. Time had to move, and it had to move beautifully. Barack Obama, during his presidency, was meticulous about punctuality and time management. His environment reflected that sense of order, not just practically, but symbolically. You'll rarely find stories of cluttered spaces or forgotten items in his personal zones. Or consider Warren Buffett, who reportedly keeps his schedule nearly empty, but lives with extreme clarity about how each hour is used. If he had a broken clock in his home, you can bet it would be fixed immediately. Not because he's superstitious, but because such disorder disrupts the alignment between physical environment and mental clarity. Let's say you have a stopped clock hanging in your hallway or bedroom. You pass it every day, but don't look at it anymore. It's become invisible. But what if it's not invisible to your subconscious? What if every time you glance its way, your brain registers the stillness and encodes the message? Nothing is moving. That message compounds over days, weeks, months. Soon you find yourself wondering why things feel stuck, why your goals are not progressing, why you feel tired despite sleeping 8 hours. Removing or fixing the clock isn't just a decorative decision. It's an energetic one. You're signaling to yourself and the universe that you are ready for movement again, ready for change. Buddhist teachings often reflect on the illusion of permanence. Everything is in motion. Everything is impermanent. Time in this sense becomes not just a backdrop, but a master teacher. When we respect time, honor it, move with it, we're aligning with reality. A stop clock is a denial of that truth. It lies to us. It says, you can stay the same. You don't have to change. Nothing is happening. But deep down, we know that isn't true. This is why Zen monks sweep daily, why tea ceremonies are timed with precision, and why mantras are repeated in rhythm. Time is sacred. Time is flow. If you remove a broken clock, consider what to put in its place. A working timepiece is a great start, but you might also consider a moving art piece, such as a kinetic sculpture or wind chime, a small fountain to symbolize flow, a round mirror to invite expansion and continuity, a vision board to remind you of goals in motion. To amplify the impact of your physical changes, consider these affirmations as you clean or replace your clock. I move with time, not against it. I allow energy to flow freely through my life. I am in sync with the rhythm of growth and progress. Every moment holds a new opportunity. Say them out loud, write them near your new clock. Let them be the vibration that replaces what once stood still. Section 3. Dead plants, fading vitality. Dead or withered plants in a home are more than just unsightly. They can significantly impact the energy and atmosphere of your living space. In Feng Shui, such plants symbolize decay, stagnation, and neglect, potentially attracting negative energy that affects the mood and prosperity of the household. Maintaining vibrant, healthy plants is essential to promote positive energy and well-being within your home. In Feng Shui philosophy, plants represent growth, vitality, and prosperity. They are living entities that enhance the flow of positive energy, or qi, throughout a space. Conversely, dead or dying plants symbolize the opposite: decline, stagnation, and decay. Keeping such plants in your home can create an atmosphere of neglect and may hinder the flow of positive energy, leading to feelings of sadness or lethargy among occupants. According to Feng Shui principles, dead plants invite negative energies and might affect the health of the inhabitants. Beyond Feng Shui, the presence of dead or withered plants can have psychological effects. They serve as visual reminders of neglect and can subconsciously contribute to a gloomy or oppressive atmosphere. This environment may lead to increased stress, decreased motivation, and a general sense of unease. Maintaining a home filled with thriving, healthy plants can uplift spirits and promote a sense of well-being and accomplishment. Many influential individuals recognize the importance of their living environment on personal and professional success. For instance, Oprah Winfrey has emphasized the significance of creating harmonious spaces, stating, "Employing Feng Shui tips can help you get out of your own way to find what it is you are really meant to do." This acknowledgement underscores the broader understanding that our surroundings, including the state of our plants, can influence our life's trajectory. Practical steps to maintain positive energy: regular inspection and care. Routinely check your plants for signs of distress, such as wilting, discoloration, or pest infestations. Prompt attention can often revive a struggling plant and prevent the accumulation of negative energy. Appropriate plant selection. Choose plants that are well suited to the specific conditions of your home, considering factors like light levels, humidity, and temperature. Selecting resilient species can reduce the likelihood of plant decline. Immediate removal of dead plants. If a plant cannot be revived, remove it promptly from your living space. This action prevents the stagnation associated with decay and allows for the introduction of new, vibrant energy. Use of artificial plants. While some may consider artificial plants as alternatives, it's important to note that, according to Feng Shui principles, fake or artificial plants are not considered suitable to keep at home as they do not contribute to the natural balance in the atmosphere. The presence of dead or withered plants in your home extends beyond aesthetic concerns. It touches upon the energy and psychological well-being of the household. By maintaining healthy plants and promptly addressing those that are dying or dead, you foster an environment of growth, positivity, and vitality. This practice not only enhances the visual appeal of your space, but also contributes to the overall harmony and prosperity of your home. Section 4. Outdated calendars. Stuck in the past. In the practice of Feng Shui, our surroundings are believed to significantly influence our personal energy and life experiences. One often overlooked item that can impact this balance is the calendar. An outdated calendar, while seemingly innocuous, may symbolize an attachment to the past and hinder one's ability to embrace present and future opportunities. Time is a central concept in Feng Shui, representing the flow of energy, continuous movement, and progress. Calendars, as tools that measure and display time, hold symbolic significance. An up-to-date calendar reflects alignment with the present moment and readiness for what lies ahead. Conversely, displaying an outdated calendar may suggest stagnation and an unconscious clinging to bygone times. This attachment can disrupt the harmonious flow of energy, known as qi, within a space. In Feng Shui philosophy, every item in our environment carries energy that influences our well-being. An outdated calendar is considered clutter, representing stagnant qi that can impede personal growth and progress. Holding on to such items may keep individuals anchored to past experiences, preventing them from fully engaging with the present and seizing new opportunities. This concept aligns with the broader Feng Shui principle that emphasizes the importance of decluttering to maintain a vibrant and dynamic energy flow. The presence of an outdated calendar can have subtle yet tangible effects on one's daily life. For instance, it may contribute to feelings of being stuck in a routine or experiencing a lack of motivation. This phenomenon is not limited to personal spaces. In professional settings, an outdated calendar can convey a message of disorganization or resistance to change. Such impressions can influence colleagues' perceptions and potentially impact career advancement opportunities. Similar to Feng Shui, Vastu Shastra, a traditional Indian system of architecture, also advises against keeping outdated calendars in the home. According to Vastu principles, an outdated calendar can signify a lack of progress and forward thinking. Both Vastu and Feng Shui emphasize the importance of keeping the energy in your home fresh and vibrant, suggesting that replacing old calendars with current ones symbolizes a continuous and positive progression in life. The influence of environmental cues on psychological states is well documented. An outdated calendar serves as a constant, albeit subconscious reminder of the past. This can subtly reinforce feelings of nostalgia or regret, diverting mental focus from current goals and future aspirations. By updating the calendar, individuals may experience a psychological shift, fostering a mindset that is more oriented toward present actions and future possibilities. Consider the experience of a professional who had been feeling stagnant in their career. Upon visiting their office, it was observed that a calendar from the previous year was still prominently displayed. Recognizing the potential symbolic impact, they replaced the outdated calendar with a current one and took additional steps to refresh their workspace. Subsequently, they reported a renewed sense of motivation and began to notice new opportunities emerging in their professional life. This anecdote illustrates how small environmental changes can have a meaningful impact on one's psychological state and life circumstances. To align with Feng Shui principles and promote a positive flow of energy, consider the following recommendations. Regularly update calendars. Ensure that all calendars in your space reflect the current date. This practice symbolizes your engagement with the present and openness to future opportunities. Mindful placement. Position calendars in areas associated with planning and decision-making, such as home offices or kitchens. This strategic placement can reinforce a proactive and organized mindset. Aesthetic considerations. Choose calendars with imagery that inspires and uplifts you. Positive visuals can enhance the beneficial energy in your environment. Declutter regularly. Beyond calendars, assess other items in your space that may be outdated or no longer serve a purpose. Removing such items can prevent the accumulation of stagnant energy. While an outdated calendar might appear to be a minor detail, its presence can carry significant symbolic weight in Feng Shui practice. By maintaining current and thoughtfully placed calendars, you can support a dynamic and forward-moving energy flow in your environment. This simple adjustment, along with a broader commitment to mindful organization, can contribute to enhanced well-being and receptivity to new opportunities in various aspects of life. Section 5. Accumulated leaves. Neglected energy. In the practice of Feng Shui, the accumulation of dry leaves in your yard or garden is more than just an aesthetic concern. It symbolizes neglect and can lead to the buildup of stagnant energy, potentially obstructing the flow of positive chi into your home. This blockage may manifest as financial difficulties and a general sense of disorder within the household. In Feng Shui philosophy, every element of your environment carries symbolic weight. Dry leaves, when left to accumulate, represent unresolved issues and neglected responsibilities. They embody decay and stagnation, disrupting the harmonious flow of energy that is essential for prosperity and well-being. Just as a cluttered interior space can hinder positive energy, so too can a neglected exterior space. When dry leaves pile up in your garden or yard, they can create areas where energy becomes trapped or stagnant. This stagnation can prevent the smooth flow of positive chi into your home, leading to various negative outcomes. Financial difficulties. Stagnant energy is often associated with financial stagnation. The accumulation of dry leaves symbolizes a blockage in the flow of wealth and opportunities, potentially leading to monetary challenges. Emotional and mental clutter. A disordered external environment can reflect and contribute to internal chaos. The presence of dry leaves may subconsciously affect your mental state, leading to feelings of overwhelm or neglect. Health concerns. Neglected outdoor spaces can harbor pests and mold, which may pose health risks to the occupants of the home. To mitigate these negative effects and promote a harmonious flow of energy, consider the following actions. Regular maintenance. Establish a routine to clear fallen leaves and debris from your yard. This practice not only enhances the aesthetic appeal, but also ensures that energy can flow freely. Incorporate Feng Shui elements. Introduce elements that encourage positive energy, such as water features, healthy plants, and appropriate lighting. Ensure that these additions are well maintained to prevent them from becoming sources of negative energy. Mindful landscaping. Design your garden with Feng Shui principles in mind. For instance, avoid placing large trees or structures that block the main entrance, as this can impede the flow of qi into your home. Consider the experience of a neighbor who faced ongoing financial issues despite having a stable income. Their yard was often cluttered with fallen leaves, reflecting a sense of neglect. Upon learning about the potential negative implications from Feng Shui, they began to regularly clean their outdoor space. Over time, they noticed an improvement in their financial stability and a more positive outlook on life. Incorporating Feng Shui principles into the maintenance of your outdoor spaces is not merely about keeping up appearances, it's about fostering an environment where positive energy can thrive. By addressing the accumulation of dry leaves and other forms of neglect, you open the door to enhanced prosperity, health, and overall well-being. Remember, the state of your external environment and is a reflection of your internal state. By nurturing and caring for your surroundings, you simultaneously nurture your own life, paving the way for positive energy to flow freely and abundantly. Section 6. Sharp decorations, sha-qi in your space. In the practice of Feng Shui, the arrangement and selection of objects within a space are believed to significantly influence the flow of energy, or qi, affecting the harmony and well-being of its occupants. One critical aspect to consider is the presence of sharp-edged decorations, such as swords, pointed sculptures, or furniture with pronounced angles. These elements can create an atmosphere of tension and conflict, disrupting the harmonious flow of energy within a home. In Feng Shui terminology, sharp edges and points are often referred to as sha-qi or poison arrows. These terms describe the negative energy emitted from objects with sharp or aggressive designs that point directly toward individuals or living spaces. This negative energy is believed to cause discomfort, stress, and even physical ailments over time. For instance, sharp corners of furniture or architectural features can create harsh and disruptive energy, leading to an imbalance in the environment. The presence of sharp-edged decorations can have several adverse effects on the harmony of a household. Increased tension. Sharp objects are thought to emit aggressive energy, which can heighten stress levels and lead to conflicts among family members. Health implications. Continuous exposure to sha qi may contribute to health issues such as headaches, anxiety, and disrupted sleep patterns. Obstructed energy flow. Poison arrows can disrupt the natural flow of positive energy within a space, leading to a sense of stagnation and imbalance. To promote a harmonious and balanced environment, consider the following strategies. Remove or reposition sharp-edged items. Eliminate decorations with sharp edges or aggressive designs. If removal isn't feasible, reposition them so they don't point toward areas where people spend significant time. Introduce soft elements. Incorporate furnishings and decor with soft lines and curves to counteract the harsh energy of sharp edges. Use plants as buffers. Strategically place plants to soften sharp corners and edges, thereby diffusing negative energy. Apply Feng Shui remedies. Utilize Feng Shui cures such as mirrors, curtains, or room dividers to deflect or block poison arrows. Opt for rounded furniture. Choose furniture with rounded edges to minimize the creation of sha qi within your living spaces. Consider the experience of a friend who had a collection of decorative knives displayed in their living room. During that period, they experienced frequent misunderstandings with family members. After removing these items and opting for softer, more rounded decor, they noticed a significant improvement in family harmony. The presence of sharp-edged decorations in your home can significantly impact the flow of energy, leading to increased tension and disrupted harmony. By identifying and addressing these poison arrows, you can create a more balanced and peaceful living environment that promotes well-being and positive relationships among occupants. Section 7. Umbrella. Indoors, shielding fortune. Opening an umbrella indoors is a widely recognized superstition associated with bad luck. Beyond cultural beliefs, this action can symbolize creating barriers within one's living space, potentially obstructing the flow of positive energy and opportunities. The superstition surrounding opening an umbrella indoors has deep historical roots. In ancient Egypt, umbrellas were primarily used to protect individuals from the sun's rays. Opening one indoors, away from the sun, was considered disrespectful to the sun god, potentially inviting misfortune upon the household. In Victorian England, the design of early umbrellas featured hard metal spokes and spring mechanisms. Opening them indoors posed physical dangers, leading to injuries or damage to property. This practical concern may have contributed to the belief that opening an umbrella indoors brings bad luck. From a Feng Shui standpoint, opening an umbrella indoors can disrupt the harmonious flow of energy, known as qi. The umbrella's canopy can act as a physical and symbolic barrier, preventing positive energy from circulating freely within the space. This obstruction may lead to feelings of stagnation or missed opportunities. Superstitions like the ones surrounding umbrellas can influence behavior and social interactions. For instance, in various cultures, opening an umbrella indoors is met with apprehension, reinforcing the belief in its negative consequences. This shared understanding can affect group dynamics and individual actions within a community. Beyond superstitions, there are practical reasons to avoid opening umbrellas indoors. The act can lead to accidents, such as knocking over objects or causing injury in confined spaces. Additionally, when umbrellas opened indoors can create slippery surfaces, posing safety hazards. While the belief that opening an umbrella indoors brings bad luck is rooted in historical, cultural, and practical contexts, it also serves as a reminder of how actions within our living spaces can symbolically influence our perception of fortune and energy flow. Whether one adheres to these superstitions or not, being mindful of our surroundings and the symbolism of our actions can contribute to a more harmonious and positive environment. Section 8. Beehive buzzing chaos near your door. In the practice of Feng Shui, the presence of a beehive near a residence embodies complex symbolism, intertwining notions of prosperity, industriousness, and potential discord. While bees are universally acknowledged for their critical role in pollination and their production of honey, often termed liquid gold. Their establishment of a hive in close proximity to a home introduces multifaceted interpretations that merit thorough exploration. In various cultural and spiritual contexts, bees and their hives are emblematic of abundance and wealth. The production of honey, a valuable and sweet commodity, positions bees as symbols of prosperity. The presence of a beehive is sometimes interpreted as an auspicious sign, indicating forthcoming financial gain or success. According to Vastu Shastra, an ancient Indian architectural science, a beehive at home symbolizes abundance and attracts fortune and wealth into one's life, also representing industry and productivity. Industry and productivity. The diligent and organized nature of bees serves as a metaphor for hard work and efficiency. A beehive exemplifies a well-structured community working harmoniously towards a common goal, inspiring humans to emulate such virtues. Community and cooperation. The collaborative existence within a beehive underscores the importance of teamwork and social harmony, reflecting the benefits of collective effort and mutual support. Conversely, the proximity of a beehive to a dwelling can also be perceived through a cautionary lens. Chaotic energy. In Feng Shui, the unpredictable movement and buzzing of bees may introduce sha qi, or negative energy, into the household. This influx can manifest as restlessness or disturbances within the domestic environment. Safety concerns. Beyond symbolic interpretations, the physical presence of a beehive poses tangible risks, including the potential for stings, especially to individuals with allergies, and structural damage if bees infiltrate the building. Uninvited intrusion. A beehive near the entrance or within the confines of a home might be viewed as an encroachment, symbolizing external factors disrupting personal space and tranquility. Consider the experience of a relative who discovered a beehive near their front door. Subsequent to this discovery, they encountered a series of unforeseen challenges and a pervasive sense of unrest within the household. Recognizing the potential implications, they enlisted professional assistance to safely relocate the hive. Following this intervention, they reported a restoration of peace and a return to normalcy in their home environment. The principles of Feng Shui have been embraced by numerous prominent individuals seeking to harmonize their living spaces and enhance personal well-being. Oprah Winfrey, the esteemed media mogul, has integrated Feng Shui concepts into her residences, aiming to cultivate environments that foster success and positivity. She has articulated that employing Feng Shui can assist individuals in aligning their surroundings with their life's purpose, facilitating the realization of their true calling. Madonna, the iconic singer and actress, is known to incorporate Feng Shui principles within her homes, reflecting her commitment to creating balanced and harmonious living spaces. Her dedication to these practices underscores a belief in the influence of spatial arrangement on personal energy and success. Richard Branson, the entrepreneurial magnate, has reportedly consulted Feng Shui experts for guidance on various aspects of his properties, including the strategic placement of doors and the incorporation of water features like aquariums and fountains to optimize the flow of positive energy. Gwyneth Paltrow, the actress and lifestyle entrepreneur, has applied Feng Shui principles to organize her living spaces, such as arranging her closet with meticulous attention to detail, using uniform wooden hangers, and systematic categorization to promote a sense of order and tranquility. When confronted with a beehive near the home, it is prudent to assess personal comfort. Reflect on your feelings regarding the hive's presence. If it induces anxiety or discomfort, addressing it becomes essential for maintaining personal well-being. Seek professional assistance. Engage experts to safely relocate the hive, ensuring the preservation of the bee colony while mitigating risks to the household. Implement Feng Shui remedies. Introduce elements that promote positive energy flow, such as plants or water features, to counterbalance any perceived negative influences. Embrace symbolic meanings. If the hive's presence is interpreted positively, view it as an opportunity to invite abundance and reinforce values of industriousness and community within the home. The presence of a beehive near a residence encapsulates a duality of symbolism, embodying both auspicious and cautionary connotations. By thoughtfully evaluating personal sentiments, cultural beliefs, and practical considerations, individuals can make informed decisions that harmonize with their values and promote a balanced living environment. The experiences of renowned figures who have integrated Feng Shui into their lives further illustrate the profound impact that mindful spatial arrangements can have on personal harmony and success. Section 9. Dolls with Eyes. The Watchful Presence. Decorative items such as dolls or statues with unsettling eyes can evoke a profound sense of unease, leading to discomfort and anxiety within a living space. In various cultural beliefs and psychological perspectives, these objects are thought to harbor negative energy or even malevolent spirits, potentially disrupting the harmony of a household. The human brain is wired to recognize faces and interpret eye contact as a fundamental aspect of social interaction. When confronted with dolls or statues possessing unsettling or lifelike eyes, individuals may experience a sense of being watched. Objects with eyes that seem to follow one's movements can create a persistent feeling of surveillance, leading to heightened anxiety and discomfort. Uncanny Valley Effect. This phenomenon occurs when an object closely resembles a human but has subtle differences that elicit feelings of eeriness and revulsion. Dolls with nearly human-like eyes often fall into this category, triggering unease. In various cultures, dolls and statues with unsettling eyes are often associated with vessels for spirits. Some belief systems hold that such objects can serve as conduits or homes for spirits, particularly if they possess realistic or penetrating eyes. This association can lead to fear and the perception of negative energy within the home. Bad omens. Certain traditions consider these items as harbingers of misfortune or ill health, especially if they are placed in private spaces like bedrooms. Consider the experience of a friend who collected antique dolls and displayed them in their bedroom. They often experienced restless sleep and unease. After removing the dolls from the room, their sleep quality improved significantly, and the sense of discomfort dissipated. Section 10. Attaching objects is too painful. From a Feng Shui standpoint, objects that evoke discomfort or possess sharp, unsettling features can disrupt the harmonious flow of energy, or qi, within a space. It's advisable to remove or relocate such items, eliminate decor that induces negative emotions, or relocate them to less personal areas of the home. Introduce positive imagery. Replace unsettling items with art or decor that promotes feelings of peace and positivity, thereby enhancing the overall energy of the space. To restore harmony within your living space, consider the following actions. Assess emotional responses. Reflect on how specific items make you feel. If an object consistently evokes negative emotions, it may be best to remove it. Consult professionals. If uncertain about the impact of certain decor, seek advice from Feng Shui consultants or interior designers who can provide guidance on creating a balanced environment. Create a calming atmosphere. Incorporate elements such as soft lighting, plants, and soothing colors to promote relaxation and counteract any residual negative energy. Decorative items with unsettling eyes can significantly affect the psychological comfort and energetic harmony of a home. By mindfully curating your living space and addressing objects that induce discomfort, you can cultivate an environment that fosters peace, well-being, and positive energy. Now that we've journeyed through all 10 of these hidden disruptors, from cobwebs and dead plants to sharp decorations and unsettling statues, one thing becomes abundantly clear. Your home isn't just a shelter. It's a mirror, a message board, a living extension of your soul. Each item you choose to keep, display, or ignore tells a story. And sometimes it's a story of holding on to the past, fearing change, or unknowingly blocking the good that's trying to enter your life. But here's the empowering truth. Once you become aware, you become powerful. Just like the friend who removed her antique dolls and finally slept peacefully, or the neighbor who swept away dry leaves and found financial clarity again, or the relative who relocated the beehive and noticed life settling into peace. Your space reflects your intentions, and small actions, like taking down that outdated calendar or finally replacing the broken clock, can lead to big internal shifts. I invite you now to take a mindful walk through your home, as if seeing it for the first time. Ask yourself, does this object lift my energy or lower it? Is it in harmony or creating tension? Decluttering isn't just about making room physically, it's about making space emotionally and energetically for the life you want to live. And don't forget, sometimes we hold on to things out of guilt, habit, or nostalgia. But even sentimental items, if they carry sadness or stagnation, deserve to be honored, then released. The practice of mindfulness doesn't stop at the meditation cushion. It's in how you place a plant, hang a piece of art, or light a candle in the evening. It's in the energy you bring to your home, and what your home in turn brings to you. And if this video helped you see your space with fresh eyes, share it with someone who might be unknowingly stuck. Let's create a ripple of awareness, because peace, clarity, and abundance begin one room at a time. Before you go, I invite you to comment below. What one item will you remove today, and what are you making space for in its place? If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the New Day Mindfulness channel, and hit the bell so you'll never miss another mindful tip to elevate your life from the inside out. Until next time, may your home be light, your heart be open, and your path be clear. You're not just throwing things away, you're letting your soul breathe.